Now it's time for Inspirational Women, and my guest, Janet Sherlund, author of Abandoned at Birth, Searching for the Arms That Once Held Me. November is National Adoption Awareness Month, and this gives us the time to have an important conversation about adoption. This is a conversation that I feel brings a new perspective to adoption, this honest story of what being adopted has meant in Janet's life. Janet Sherlund, good morning, and thank you so greatly for being with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. I'm really grateful because you're here to share such an important part of your life, of course, but life for so many people in this country. And I certainly am touched by what you share and reveal in Abandoned at Birth. I know you had to feel compelled to write it. Did it feel like something you just had to share? Because you write it so eloquently that it feels so natural the way it flows.
Thank you. Yes, I was absolutely compelled to write this book. And I think I'd been wanting to write it my entire life. I grew up, obviously, I was adopted at birth. I grew up in a family where all four of us were adopted from different biological families. And I always knew no one understands what this feels like. Even my own parents, I don't think adoptive parents really understood what we felt as adoptees. And it's such a lonely, sad, you're full of grief and loss and feelings, of course, of abandonment and rejection. Even if you have a perfectly lovely adopted placement, that just cannot erase the primal wound that was inflicted on you when you were separated from your authentic identity and your heritage. And so I grew up, and if I tried to say to friends, oh, I wish I could see someone I looked like or who I shared interests with, they'd go, oh, that's not important. I don't look like my parents, or I don't like the things my parents like. But it's only not important if you have it. If you literally are growing up in a vacuum and you don't know why you are who you are, where you come from, why you look like you do. You don't see anyone that mirrors you or stories that you can feel are part of your heritage, and talking about ancestors or even grandparents. It's like, well, they're not really, I didn't really come from them. And I wanted to tell this point of view, the adoptee's point of view, so that other adoptees could feel affirmed and say, yes, okay, that's how I felt too. And so that people who didn't have experience with adoption would understand what it's really like to be the person asked to live a pretend life. Even if it's a fine life, even if it's a perfectly good life, it's still false. And you feel that. It's a very organic, very visceral feeling of I'm not really bonded to these people. I'm participating with them, but there's not a bond there. Something's missing. And so literally my entire life, I was driven to try and express these feelings so that other people could glimpse them and maybe open their minds and hearts to, okay, we talk about the adoptive parents' wants and needs. We talk about the biological parents' wants and needs. What about that individual being traded between them and what they've lost and how they're asked to live? And we really haven't paid attention to that story. And that's what why I tried to write this book, to allow people to feel that.
And it feels like you really have accomplished it, at least for yourself, to be able to express that it's out here in the world. And so the book has been out for some time now. And has that been the kind of reaction then you've gotten from others?
Yes, absolutely. Adoptees are saying, thank you, this is my truth. And it's so good to see it, legitimatized and affirmed here. And more surprising for me, I think, is the number of non-adoptees or people who don't, maybe they know someone or have a friend within the adoption community, but non-adoptees to say, oh, I never thought about it that way, or I never realized that, or oh, I didn't understand that. And so it's been a very gratifying and very interesting journey since the book was published in May. And I think more surprised by the reactions of non-adoptees and seeing sort of a light bulb go on for them to try and get a window into the adoptee point of view instead of the more cultural. And and I always say adoption is a trauma. And it's a trauma for every child that experiences it. We all handle trauma differently in life. And so whether you confront it, deny it, numb it, whether it's finally appears later in life or earlier in life, it's there. It's also the only trauma that I can think of that the victims are expected to be grateful. So when you speak up as an adoptee and you want to talk about the trauma that you've experienced, you're often met with that, but you should be grateful. You have a lovely family, you have a roof over your head, you're being taken care of. And while that's not every adoptee's experience, not every adoptee gets adopted into a fine family.
Right.
And there is no family that's perfect. But two things can be true at once. You can have a perfectly fine adoption and still have been traumatized by being adopted. And that has to be recognized because so much of our lives and our truth are silenced. We are silenced by this cultural expectation of gratitude, but we are also silenced because we are grateful and we don't want to hurt our adoptive parents. And I didn't write this book until my adoptive parents had both passed away, but I'd been wanting to write it my entire life. So there's a silencing of our truth and the trauma that we've experienced for two reasons, and sort of that go hand in hand. Society not wanting to hear anything but gratitude, and our gratitude not wanting us to hurt the people that have taken care of us and raised us.
And isn't it interesting that we don't want to hear that honesty, that truth about what exists, that we want to somehow just put this paintbrush over it and say, yes, you should be grateful, but at the same
Yeah.
time, there's this other piece, and to have to deal with it really is important for us to realize that.
Yeah, and we have to realize what often is the judgment of the good family you're being adopted into. It's often being judged on very superficial markers. And just because there are maybe two parents in a family and a nice roof over your head and a yard doesn't mean that you are having your emotional needs met and you are growing up to be a whole and integrated person. And that's something that we really have a hard time seeing in this society, in this world. And I'm, of course, very, very much a big proponent of kinship adoption, where adoption is necessary to stay within the family. And it's also part of this equation is the fact that adoption is an industry. This is an industry that makes billions of dollars, selling children, and it's internationally and nationally. And there are those that are very interested in making sure there's a supply of babies available for families that would like to pay good money to have them. And so I think we also have to be clear that in adoption, there's not always a kindly social worker working in the best interest of the child and these, loving parents with their arms outstretched. But there is a very, very well-organized, well-oiled machine that it's an industry. They call it the adoption industry for a reason. So, and now more and more we're seeing stories uncovered. Most recently in Italy with the church, the Catholic Church, and what they did. It was in the New York Times a few weeks ago. Telling mothers their babies had died or taking them from them and selling them in America. But we've heard that same story in so many countries. In our own country, certainly in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, those things were still happening. So there's a really dark side to adoption. And when we don't look at the point of view of the adoptees, we are missing the chance to try and do better and make the situation at least work better than it has been. Adoptees have 4 times the suicide rate of the average population. And that is considered low because that's a suicide rate reported by adoptive parents, not adoptees themselves. And they're very overrepresented in hospitalizations for both addiction and mental health, and also in the penal system. So the individuals who have been adopted and are being asked to live that life, which is a just biologically, cellularly, emotionally false life, are really suffering consequences, as is our society, by not addressing those many issues that are all, societal problems. So I'm so glad there's a huge online community now that's really talking and giving voice to these realities. And it's very gratifying to see this open up and to see these conversations going and starting and continuing. And I'm grateful for any opportunity to people to see that it's not just a angry, ungrateful adoptee who's speaking out, but it's all of us and all of our experiences trying to say, this is what these actions lead to, these feelings lead to these consequences. So how can we change this? What do we need to do going forward to make things better?
And the online community or communities, there's probably multiple ones that you refer
Yeah.
to, with persons who are interested in that. Is it just a matter of just searching adoption and finding, or is there a recommendation in
I think
direction?
I mean, one of the ways I got involved or put my feet in that water, I say, and I didn't, when I was writing my book, I didn't look to any other outside voices because I wanted to make sure it was my experience and my voice. But since then, I created an Instagram account for my book, Janet Sherlund Official. And I guess as the algorithm does, when you have a certain interest, it populates it. And so suddenly I find a feed that's just populated with so many voices and so many accounts centered on the adoptee point of view. And there are certainly a number that I've really enjoyed and looked to as what I feel are very accurate sources. But I think it's easy enough for someone to go online and to go onto Instagram or online and type in adoptee point of view or adoption. And like you say, there are different communities and there are different points of view. And depending on what you're searching for, you might get swept up into a algorithm that's adoptive parents' points of view. That's very different than the adoptee's point of view. So, I think you try to be really specific when you're searching as to what voice you're looking to listen to.
Well, what is so interesting to me, I put foster care and adoption in two separate categories, which I probably shouldn't, because as you talked about the adoptees ending up as suicide statistics, ending up in a prison situation, I think of that feels like it comes from foster care, but to think of it as adoption, as you say, these are societal problems, and this is an important area then to really work with and understand and do something constructive with. I think one of the things for that you're suggesting is we have to have more open records across the country, and that doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I think in still, it's the latest I've known, 40 states still have closed adoption records. And I was certainly born in that era, and my records are actually still officially sealed in the state of New Jersey where I was adopted. But one of the things I was recently shocked to find is, and I read this in Gretchen Sison's great book, Relinquished, that open adoption, where that is available, and many places it is now, is not legally binding. So that you can have adoptive parents agree to anything with biological parents as they're obtaining that child. But going forward, they don't have to stick to it. There is no court that will uphold that. So it's kind of pretend, it's kind of fake. And her book was full of stories of situations where open adoption doesn't stay open, and the devastation to the birth mothers or parents who entered into that contract believing that they would know their child throughout life. So there's still far to come. We do, yes, at least we have open adoption now. That's great, but steps in the right direction. But I'm so troubled to learn that it's not legally enforced. And I think I don't have experience in the foster system, but people I know that have been in that system. I was once speaking, and someone asked what the difference might be, and the gentleman I was speaking with who had been in the foster system said, well, for one thing, I knew my parents. I mean, I knew where I came from. I knew my origin story. I knew who my authentic family was. And he said, and also in foster care, you think, at least you hope it's a temporary situation. But in adoption, especially in closed records, you don't know anything about yourself. I didn't know my ethnicity. I didn't know where I was from, why I was adopted, what the story was, what happened to my parents, why was I given up, and why did no one in their families want me, and then certainly a permanent situation. And you have a name, and but you know that that name was very capricious. You know that had you been, a couple names up or down on the list at the agency, you would have gone to a different family. So your whole life is like so capricious. You just everything there's just and you feel, I think one of the things I want people to understand about adoption is you feel the difference. It's just a cellular visceral feeling. You can be with your adoptive family and feel loved, but you know that you're different. You feel that. And that is such a common thread amongst all the adoptees. It's like, I always just felt so different. I felt so other. There's such a detachment. It's very primal. It's so deep, and I don't think we have the science of it or the words for it. But when I ultimately met my biological parents and siblings at late in life in my 50s and 60s, the feeling, the visceral, physical feeling, the minute I looked into my father's eyes, who I didn't know two things about, couldn't have answered two questions about him. I looked into his eyes, and that big black hole I lived within my middle of me the whole life just filled right up, just chunk, it filled right up. And I was found. I was home. And I didn't know anything about this man, but it was so physical. And being with my biological mother, ultimately, who didn't want to meet me, it took many years. It was very difficult, even though she didn't want a connection with me and wanted to keep me at an arm's length. When I was near her, and I'd met her about 3 times, I physically felt so found and connected, even though I was being rejected. So it is the most belonging, and identity is so much more physical and biological than I think we recognize as a culture. And that is something that is, you just can't fake. You feel it growing up. You just feel it.
And in your book, Abandoned at Birth, I feel that you are able to express this so clearly that we really get it. So you've done just an amazing job, an amazing work in being able to convey that. And I feel others will feel encouraged, should they have not felt, they can really search for their birth parents by your story. At least I trust that's going to happen if they haven't felt that. But again, you just express it so well, and so well that it caused me pain. I'm reading and I'm tearing. I mean, I'm getting the Kleenex because, you convey it in such a way, and it's hard to imagine people being able to inflict that kind of emotional pain on an infant.
Yes, and when we're defenseless,
yes.
we had no choice,
yes.
and we were. I have a friend who's adopted, and she has said those of us who are adopted wouldn't wish this on anyone. That's saying a lot, and most people don't expect that. When I wrote the book, I really wrote it to be very emotional. I wanted to try and convey the feelings, because I know there are books out there that tell the story of, oh, I didn't know this and then I found that, but I really wanted to try and convey what it felt like. And so I'm so grateful to have you say that you felt that. And it's interesting that I've had a lot of people read the book who haven't experienced adoption, but because they had, say, they lost a parent early in life, or they went through a painful divorce in their life. I mean, we all as human beings suffer from loss and abandonment and grief, and it's part of the human condition. And I think in reading my book, that those emotions are tapped into in other ways that people may have experienced that to varying degrees. And I hope that that ultimately my journey shows sort of how to look at that. The only way out is through. So how to look into the deep, and come out the other side, and some of the tools that are needed, knowledge and support and therapy, and ultimately acceptance, and living. I've been asked at times, "Oh, are you all better now?" I was like,
Oh dear.
right,
Oh.
I know. But it's like living with grief. You never
Mm.
get over grief. You just learn to carry it with you. And I think that's ultimately where I've come out.
And to come to a place where you have found a new family too. I mean, that is so, oh, that felt deeply rewarding to
Yeah.
know that that was possible, and encourages, because typically it's the birth mother. Obviously, that's where the records would be, and you're not even having thought about your father at all in the equation. But
Yeah.
how beautiful that was, is.
Yeah, it really is. It's the most transformative thing that ever happened to me in my life, to meet my biological family. I finally made sense for the first time in my life. And there are those who will say, "Oh, it might be scary if you go look, and there's something bad in the family or the person or some situation." And I say, but you have to know that. Like, if you're born into a biological family, you don't get to come into the world saying, "I don't want any problems in this family. Thanks." No mental health issues, no legal problems, no alcoholism, no, I don't want that. You're born into a family and you take what you get, and dealing with that, makes you or breaks you. And so, and adoptees are not more fragile when we're born than anyone else. And I think you have to know if there's something really negative and bad, and you have to know everything that's in you to understand yourself better. When I ultimately met my birth mother, and she wasn't a sterling human being, um but it was a good cautionary tale, because there were elements of myself in her that I dismissed in myself as being not really me. And I could go, "Oh wow, like, don't let that take over. Look what that can wreak." So it's you can't really know yourself fully unless you have all the information, the good, bad, and the ugly. And it's easier to understand yourself with that full complement of knowledge than with only pieces of it, or with only very edited pieces of it that an adoption agency or someone might be willing to pass along to you. But we're just the same as everybody else, and we deserve the ability to process our lives, and manage it just as everyone else has had to.
Right. And what it does for you when you have to be aware that there could be rejection, as you experienced, and that there's the pain, but yet
Yeah.
you find the
Yeah.
resilience, you find what you need from that. um, and who knows how it plays out for others in their lives when that happens. But I guess that is something to just be aware that, not all birth parents are ready for a reunion, like
Yeah.
your dad, your
Right.
biological
Right.
dad.
And I had both experiences. Yeah, I had a good experience and a bad experience. In my case, my search, and I just had this drive throughout my life to find the answers. And I believed that finding the answers were going to heal me. I had a piece missing, and I wanted to find that last puzzle piece and put it in there. And it was just this drive of, I think, self-preservation and self-healing. Knowledge is going to heal me. I'm going to feel better. I'm going to feel okay once I know everything. Not everyone approaches trauma in their life that way. And I've had siblings that turn to drugs and alcohol, or deep denial. And of course, we all have friends in life who deal with things differently. But there's usually a point, and there has been a point in everyone's story I've heard so far, where at some point, there's a life circumstance or a health circumstance, or a death of a parent or something, that makes someone stop and take stock and look, and face what they need to face. And yes, it can be hard and difficult, and that's why I say it. You need some support. You need help. You need people who understand your journey, and you need professionals. Sometimes good therapist who understands your journey. But you can get through it. You always get through it. Just get some help getting through it. But you'll get through it, and you'll feel so much stronger on the other side.
Well, I appreciate that you listened to that voice, that drive within you to do this, because of course it has helped in your own growth and healing, but for others who have different journeys, it has that way of being that healing medicine for any of us. And as you said, even for different experiences in our life, even if we're not adopted, we can apply those lessons to ourselves. So I think that you've just really done such an amazing work here, given us a great gift.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So we should say the book is available. It's real. This is November, Adoption Month, but adoption happens every day of the year, so there's no specific time to really address that. But to really shed the spotlight here and to become more informed or be encouraged, what a wonderful gift just in general, because this is the gifting season too. So
Yes.
the book is available through all of our favorite book sources, right?
Absolutely. And Barnes and Noble and bookshop.org and Amazon, of course. And there's also an audiobook for anyone who prefers to be active while they're listening. And that's a new format for me, but I know that many of my friends say, oh, I like to listen to a book while I'm driving or working out or something. So I did record an audiobook as well.
Oh, so it's your voice.
Yes.
Great. I think that makes it just so much more impactful. But I'm glad that you're the voice of the book as well. And so there is the website for the book. So Abandoned at Birth.
Yeah. Book. It's abandonedатbirthbook.com for the website, and on Instagram it's Janet Sherlund Official.
Great. Well, so lots of ways to connect. Just an important aspect, important part of our life. Invariably, we'll know someone, and it's a way to support a friend, some extended family member, that sort of thing, to be able to connect with them. Because I think kind of the same era, there were perhaps children. Well, it happened in my family that my cousin had a baby. Her parents adopted this child, but it was never talked about. So I think here's an opportunity, I feel, to reach out and make a connection and maybe bring some kind of peace too.
I hope so. Yes, and I think for all of us, just re-examining maybe what is identity and what is belonging, and what gives me that and that gift, and even for people who think they're not, I found family better in friends than I did with my actual family. It's like, maybe re-examine really how you learned to be who you were before. It's nice to have a family to be able to push against, even if you're walking away from them. And adoptees don't have anything to push against or hold on to. So I think also the issues of just identity and belonging are raised in anyone's adoption story. And I hope people will appreciate that as well.
Absolutely. Again, an amazing book, Abandoned at Birth. You're just such an excellent writer, just, a good storyteller. That's the truth. It's a real story.
Yeah,
but
that's everything's
yes,
true,
but
yeah.
and we all do love stories. I think there's so much we can learn here, and hopefully be, some of what our country, our world needs in terms of bringing solutions to the pain and the hurts that exist.
Good.
Right. Well, again, Janet Sherlund, it's been wonderful to connect with you. Thank you for such a beautiful book. Thank you for taking time with us today.
Thank you so much for your interest and your support. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. That brings us to the end of a very full hour of Inspirational Women with Janet Sherlund and Sunday Morning Magazine with Glenn Rockowitz. I'm Kate Daniels, your host, and I greatly appreciate your sharing this hour with me and these special guests. For details you might have missed or information you'd like to know, please just send me an email, kated@warm1069.com. That'll get it right to me, and I'll get right back to you. Also, if you'd like to listen again or share these important stories with your family and friends, find the podcast on our Warm 1069 webpage. Just click on the Listen tab, then Podcasts, then either of the show names, and then look for the guest names. I now wish you and your family a day of remembrance of stories in your life and what they mean to the life that you're living. Have a week of the same, and then please plan to join me again next weekend for another hour of Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women on Warm 106.9. Good morning.